Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KS USA. Today we're going to talk about how to service your LEV Integra A12 dropper seat post. Okay, so some of the basic tools that we're going to need to service KS dropper we'll go over here. If there are additional or specific or specialty tools for your particular model that we're going to go over, we'll discuss those in further detail a little bit later on in the video. So you want to start with a good quality biodegradable degreaser. We tend to like the simple green cleaners here. You can dilute them down to whatever ratio you want. They wash away easily, and they're not caustic or damaging. So a good degreaser. For lubrication, we recommend either the KS Post Paste, or if you don't have that available, the Slick Oleum is basically the same formula. It's designed specifically for suspension use, more specifically air oil systems, so it's a really good lubrication to use. We don't recommend using automotive grease because they tend to be a higher viscosity and can cause poor performance of your dropper if you use those. A pair of soft jaws so that you can hold the seat post. The one that we have here happens to have a round clamp hole in it, but if you can't find one of these in your local market, you can also do a V-block, which a lot of times you can get those from Amazon or from a local hardware store, a machine shop supply. Those kind of places have them. And essentially you just need something that you're going to be able to clamp and hold the tube. If you don't have access to that, don't panic. You can also use the bicycle frame to hold the post in place while we unthread the collar. We'll go over that in a little more detail later. Utility knife, we generally will use this just to help us remove the guide bushings. So these are handy to have. If you don't have one, you can do it by using your fingernail, but I'd recommend if you can find a utility knife, definitely grab that. A set of Allen wrenches. So you're going to need from a 6 down to a 1.5 millimeter set. So they can either be a T-handle like this, or you can have one of the little pocket folding ones work great too, but just make sure they're good quality so you don't end up rounding or stripping out any of the bolts. Last would be a strap wrench, and the strap wrench is basically to remove the collar. You'll need these on nearly all models of KS dropper, with the exception of the A12 Integra and the Rage I. So those two will use a little different system that we'll talk about later, but the strap wrench you can get from most hardware stores, and they're generally used for fitting pipes that you don't want to do damage to. So if they're a chrome finish or something, these allow you to grab and turn pipe without damaging the surface. So local hardware stores, and again, this is called a strap wrench. And then we definitely like to use a microfiber towel for cleaning and the internal parts and everything. These work really well with the degreaser. They tend to take all of the debris off of your post. So you can get these through most hardware stores, or if you have a Costco in your area, they do their Kirkland brand of towels that work really well. So a couple things that we didn't talk about tool-wise earlier is a pair of snap ring pliers. Second item that we're going to look at here is something you can get from your local bike shop, and this is a KS service tool. This is designed to hold the bushings in place when you reassemble, and also to help you seat the wiper seal on this LEV Integra. So your local bike shop can help you get a hold of these. The last item is a bushing press, and so this is also something that's a service tool that you can get from your local bike shop, or if you have a hard time finding this, we'll go through how to kind of create a DIY version of this tool so you can get your post apart. So let's start off by removing the actuator assembly. We're going to use our snap ring tool. Remove the snap ring here. Okay, now in some models you're going to have a snap ring. Some of them you may have 1 or 2 shim washers that are in there. If your post does have the shim washers, make sure you take those out and set them aside, and you're going to put those back in when you reassemble your post. If you don't have any in your post, then don't worry about putting them back in. Now we'll go ahead and just tap this, and you'll see that the actuator slides easily out. We're going to use some soft jaws here And you can either use a V-block, you can use these soft jaws like we have here, or if you don't have either one of those, you could use shop rag to put in here. I will caution you though that many times the bench vise has serrated teeth and they can bite all the way through a rag. So be really careful if you're going to do it this way. Probably the best thing to do if you don't have soft jaws would be to use a couple of soft blocks of wood like pine and use those in place of the soft jaws here. So we're going to go ahead and clamp those. Okay, just light pressure to hold it in place. And then we're going to take our crescent wrench and we're going to gently turn that. Be really careful with this because it is an aluminum hollow shaft. It's threaded and you can damage it, so be careful. And then we're going to put a little bit of a side load here as we pull it out, and that's going to help us draw out the push rod. We can set this whole assembly aside. We're also going to take the bottom out bumper out, set it aside. Okay, we can take this whole assembly out. Now earlier we talked about the press, and we talked about being able to make a DIY tool. So if you've got the press, that's the best way to go. Now if you don't have one, I'd highly recommend looking into getting one. But if you don't have the time or accessibility to it, you can always take this down to your local hardware store at this point and find a couple of washers that just fit inside the tube. So they'll be able to slide in. You'll want to find a bolt that fits into the hole of that washer that's about 75 to 100 millimeters long, and you want to find a nut that fits on that bolt. What you'll do is you'll put the bolt, the two washers on, thread the nut on. Once you have that assembly, slide that down inside. You'll take the snap ring with the sharp edge out, snap that in place. Then you can turn that bolt, and what'll happen is the bolt will thread into the nut pushes against the washer, and the bolt pushes against this push rod, and it will push it completely out of the post. Now, if you've got the tool, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the push rod back in, we're gonna push down until it's compressed, and then I'm gonna gently turn it to the side while keeping side force on it. And what I did there is I released the push rod so that the shaft locks in place, but if I pushed on that push rod and didn't hold the shaft down, the shaft will continue to come out. But if I rock it to the side, that allows this to lock in place and then take the push rod out. The reason I did that is the tool here has limited range inside. Okay, now, if you're using this tool, you won't be able to get the snap ring to engage there because the tool is too tall to lock. So what we do on this one instead is just using the jaws and catching the very end. We'll tighten that down. That's going to clamp force just a little bit on that end of the tool. And then we'll take our 10 millimeter and we'll turn this. And so if you're using the bolt, it's basically just like this, but it's going to be a bolt with a hex head on the end. If you're using the tool, you go this route. And I'm going to take this out so I can kind of show you this end. And you can see here where the seal is. My finger's on there, so you'll kind of see it starting to lift out. So that just basically pushes that whole assembly, the bushing and the seal out. And you can see that's now been pushed out. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and slide the whole assembly out. Now, we're going to take our utility knife and we're going to pop off the guide bushings. Now, something to note on the guide bushings, there's 6 slots total on here. And depending on when your post was produced, you may either have an alternating metal and plastic bushing, you may have all metal bushings, or you may have half metal, half plastic on each one. What's important here is just to take note of the way they were installed before you take them apart and put them back the same way. Nothing wrong with any of the different bushing configurations. They just changed over time in production. And so just take note of what you have and make sure you put them back the same way you got them out. Okay. We're going to take the band bushing off here. Now we have, in this case, a POM style upper bushing. Your post may or may not have the POM. It might be POM, it might be an alloy bushing with the DU insert in it. So again, it really doesn't matter which one you have, they both work great. Just take note when you take it apart. The bushing does have a radiused edge. Okay, if you have the metallic bushing, there will be a band of aluminum inside that you can see, and then the bushing material. The band of the aluminum or the radiused edge goes away from the post towards the end when you put it back on. So I like to take it and put it face down. That way when I put it back on, I know the direction it goes. Next thing we're going to do is take the wiper seal off. Okay. Now, if you are working on your post now because you're replacing a cartridge, if you had some kind of wear issue, cartridge that maybe leaked or anything like that, if you're replacing the cartridge for any reason, now would be the time to use that new cartridge to put this back together. In our case, the cartridge is in good shape. We don't need to service this. It's completely sealed and not user serviceable. So we're just going to go ahead and use some degreaser. We'll wipe that all clean. Set it aside. We're going to take our mass tube and we're going to clean. First of all, there's two lips in here. One step is the first lip. Second step, there's another lip. And then you have inside where the guide bushings are going to ride. Those first two, you want to get in here with the degreaser and get them very clean. Reason for that is when you put this seal back in, the seal needs to adhere or stick because of the stickiness of the rubber to this inside surface. If there's grease on that, this will eventually want to walk its way back out. So you want to make sure those are very clean when you prep them. Okay. Now if we want to look down inside, if there's any debris or any dirt, you can take your towel that's got degreaser on it. Use the handle of your tool to push that down in there. And just use that microfiber towel to get everything nice and clean. And again, we're going to take a clean spot on the towel and just wipe that surface again on the edge. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and grease this up. And what I do is put some on the end of my finger. Now I'm going to go in about to my knuckle. And I'm going to make sure that I'm not getting any grease on that outside surface where the seal has to go, but I lube up the inside where the guide bushings and everything go later. Okay, we'll set that aside. Now with the rag with degreaser on it, I'm going to clean the wiper seal. Make sure that there's no dirt or debris on it. I'm going to take the grease and I'm going to fill the cavity between the two lips of the wiper seal with grease. Now we do that for two reasons. One, it pre-lubes the seal, but it also creates a water barrier. So water and moisture is not going to get past that, and it's going to help protect your post and keep it running longer. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this on, and I'd put this on just a slight angle because you have a lip here that holds your band bushing in, and that's a hard edge, and so sometimes that seal's a little hard to get to pass over. So if you do slight angle and then slide it on, it'll be a lot easier. Okay, now again, we talked about the direction of this bushing. Make sure the radius or the aluminum band faces downward. We wipe that down with the degreaser and the towel. We'll slide that back on. Okay, now our guide bushings. So we're going to clean up all of our guide bushings, and we want to inspect both the cylindrical POMs, make sure that they are cylindrical. There's no flat spots or anything worn in them. The cylindrical metallic ones, we're going to check also to make sure that they're round and smooth and no damage. These all look really good. Next tip that I'm going to do or give you here is if you look at the back of the post, if you have metallic and plastic ones, make sure you line up a metallic one with that spot. Now sometimes, if you don't have any grease in the slot, this one actually had a little bit still in it, but if there's no grease in that slot, these can kind of fall out on you when you're trying to work with them. So put a little dab of grease there and install it. Then I'm going to go around to the front. So this one lines up to the front of the post. I'm going to put the metallic one in there. And then I'm just going to alternate. 2 of the plastics go in here. And again, this is going to vary depending on what came out of your post. So if you had all plastic, one piece, every other one, do that. If you had alternating, do that. Just follow whatever was in the post to begin with. And sometimes these just don't want to cooperate, and you just got to put a little bit more grease in them and get those to sit into place. Okay. So we'll set that aside for a second, and we're going to just clean up this band bushing. Now, and notice on this particular bushing, it's got a little edge that was slightly damaged. I'm just going to take that and trim that tiny little piece that's been damaged and clean it up, because you want this to be good and flat when you put it back on. So it's not going to hurt anything to clean that up. So if you do have a little bit of damage from when you took it apart or previous repair, you can do that. These are also available from your local dealer, so don't be afraid to replace it if you see damage that you don't think that you can clean up and fix. This is our KS tool to make life a little easier reassembling this. What we're going to do is there's 3 grooves on the tool. You're going to line the thin end up with the end of the post, get it lined up with the 3 bushings, and we're going to walk it back just a little bit. I'm going to put that band bushing on there, and what I did is it's, you know, a two-piece or a split bushing. So I open it up and I set the one rounded side on this end, got it seated into the groove, and while holding pressure on it, I'm going to come over to the other side, and now where the seam is on that bushing, it's going to line up in the middle of this other part of the tool. And now I can hold that down, and I want to make sure that the 2 halves where they come together line up and are seated in that groove. If you don't have this tool or couldn't find it, you could actually take a piece of an aluminum can and you would cut a strip that's this width, and you want it to be a diameter that when it wraps around this tube, it basically just touches. And you can just by hand form that into a round tight roll and put it around this stuff. That's going to help you hold it in for this next step. I'd highly recommend sourcing this tool. It makes the job a lot easier. But if time doesn't allow it and you got to get the post serviced and back together, or if you just can't find this tool, the aluminum can trick does the job in most cases. Okay, so now we're going to take this and slide it over, and we're going to push down, and we're going to rotate this till we feel it catch. Okay, so that slides down. We take these out, set them aside. Now, this tool also works great if we flip it the other way. We can push down, and that preseats our bushing down inside. Okay. Then we can take the same tool, and if you look at the tool here, you have a lip. Okay, make sure that the spring clip is seated fully so you don't damage it. In fact, maybe what we'll do here to make this a little bit easier to see is we'll just go ahead and take that out, let it stay below, I think that might be a little bit easier for you to handle. Okay, and we're going to close this down just so that the two halves touch. Okay, now you want to be careful because the head of this is next to the vise and you don't want to damage it. But if you just fold up your towel, put your hand on it. And again, when we put the vise clamp on there, we just closed it up so that you can see this corner here rested on the jaw. So you don't want to have any of the vise jaws against any of your stanchion here. So just on this portion, and then we tap that down and that drove the seal in. So you can see now the seal is flush all the way around. We're just going to go ahead and, if you start with one end with your thumbs and just walk it around, that'll snap right back on there. You'll hear it click when it goes into place. Okay, now we're going to put our bottom out bumper back on. Take our push rod, make sure that's clean. A little bit of grease on that helps and prevents any water from building up or any corrosion from happening if you're in inclement weather. I like to take the push rod end cap out, put it in place first, put another little dollop of grease on the end of that. We'll go ahead and thread this back in. Okay, and we're going to extend this back out so we've got a little more real estate to get a hold of. Now, this next part's really important. Sorry, greasy hands. Okay, so the next part that's important here, as I was mentioning, is you can use your adjustable wrench to tighten this down. Do not put it on this way and crank it down. You will break the actuator. This is made from aluminum, and there's a hole drilled through it for that push rod. So it's a hollow aluminum shaft, and if you go torquing on it, you can break it. So just turn it so that it's hand tight. Put your wrench on it this way, and just watch how much we turn it. That's it. That's all we need to do. So you're just maybe an 1/8 or 1/16 of a turn, and that's it. It doesn't need to be super tight. There's no radial load on that at all. So just get it so that it's slightly snugger than hand. And then we're going to go ahead and slide this up. I would recommend probably wiping off the little O-ring seal that's here. And just put a new thin coat of grease on that O-ring. And then get it lined up and just pop it in. Now, if you had shim washers at the end of it, you're going to drop those on first. Ours didn't, so we don't have to put those on ours. The sharp edge of the snap ring needs to point away from the post or out towards the open end of the post. And I'm going to show you a little trick how to get this snap ring started. So I'm going to set it up so that the slot in the snap ring is on the side here. I'm going to take my Allen wrench, and let me move this out of the way so I can show you this. If you put the Allen wrench in this way to pull up and you pull on an angle, you're probably going to break this actuator. Okay, it's not designed for a side load. So when you do this, I'm going to put my fingers around the end of it, my thumb on top, and what you see is I actuate it this way. So I'm not doing this, I'm going straight up and down. Okay, so we're going to put this on. Okay, and again, the slot lines up with the side. I'm going to put this in and I'm going to open the valve up. And then I'm going to push the end down and I'm going to let it sit back down. So you can see the actuator is now sitting on top of the snap ring. Now when I go to put it in, I'm not fighting trying to get that underneath. Okay, so I just keep my finger here so it doesn't pop back out when I'm doing the snap ring. Get that in. And then I just use the tip of the plier. And you hear that snap. That means that it's snapped in. So push it in a couple spots, make sure that it's good. Check your actuator, make sure that everything's operating, and then give it a tap. If you give it a tap and it didn't seat, it's probably going to pop back out. better to catch it now than when you put it in the bike, okay? So then if you want to give it a test, again, you can use our little trick to pull that up and you can actuate it, okay? So depending on how much air pressure you have in it, that's going to dictate the return speed, but it should move smoothly and you should get it to top all the way back out. We didn't take our clamp off in this case to show you how to service it, but if you're putting this back on your bike, you've probably taken the clamp off to take the seat off. Now would be a good time to clean everything with the degreaser. Use a little bit of grease, a waterproof grease is preferable, on all of the points that make metal to metal contact. You can also use anti-seize compound when you put those together. Make sure when you tighten the clamp down, you follow the torque specifications that's marked on the head of your post, and make sure you tighten these bolts down evenly. That way you get a good solid clamping and you don't have any issues going forward. So that's it. You're ready to put that back on your bike.